Who does that?
Well, there are two people in there.
David, we see you at the bridge game.
Usually I see it out here when you guys dumped out there.
And it was it.
Yeah.
It was a great game.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Last year we thought it was because, you know, the pandemic was over, everybody, you know, we figured it happened, and people had, you know, parades, so everybody boarded it too far.
I make the point, I just find it more interesting and each big. That was great.
Still, we're happy.
I loved it when they had the stilts. That was great.
But yes, it was, you know, a lot more muscle cars, you know, a lot more people throwing candy.
And those Disney characters,
Yes.
they were fun, and there were floats and.
The dogs,
Yeah, the
you
dog.
know, no horses, no cows.
Well, her horse was there.
Why did it go there?
Not a real horse, it was a dog, a Great
She
Dane.
had the Great Dane.
I'm sorry, we're still having a great day. You have pause.
You just have to start. Are you all set to start? I'm just checking. Are you all ready? Good evening, everyone. We'd like to get started. It is Tuesday, July 5th, and we're all recovering from the break from July. And it is 5:35. First order of business for us is could I ask for a motion to accept the minutes from 6:20 and 6:27?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from 6:20 and 6:27.
I'll second.
Second, thank you, Mary. I'll take note that the minutes from the 27th are the incorrect date. They both say June 20th.
The other thing was there was a present from CCTV and there was nothing there. It's not a big deal, but
Okay, on which one?
on the 27th.
Okay, the 27th.
So I don't know if someone was there and we just missed it.
Chico was here then?
What's that?
Who was here?
It was,
Jackson.
Chico was left.
Jackson Cash.
Okay. Any other adjustments to the minutes? I'd like to take a motion to approve them both. I'm sorry, we have a motion. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, it's unanimous.
So I'm sorry, Phil, the only change to the 27th was the date, correct?
Right.
Correct. And adding the CATV representative.
To the 20th.
Till the 20th. Sorry.
Oh, that, Jackson was on the 27th, I don't remember who was there.
Yeah.
So we don't know who was here on the 20th.
I can find out, it was Warren. Warren was here at the meeting, yeah.
I think so.
The next point of business are the accounts payable or the orders up through today, July 5th. We have a motion to accept those minutes, or those orders.
I'll make a motion to approve the orders up till July 5th, 2022.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jim. Any discussion?
I just have an odd question. There are several places where we pay the bill and it says next year. And why are they being paid this year?
So that they go out, because the next meeting isn't until July 18th. So, for instance, Great Orphan Valley Solid Waste District fiscal year starts, it's already started. So a couple of them, probably wouldn't kill anybody if a couple of them are timely, but, so those, it'll be expensed in next fiscal year 23. But it went around, it technically won't go out until tomorrow. Once you guys have signed this and Cheryl has a chance to get it, so we're already into July 6th. So it's just a matter of processing it in June, but making sure that the expense happens in fiscal year 23.
The other question is, how come we paid for 2 mowings that we haven't even got yet?
So, so I spoke to Martin this morning, we pulled those out, so it's just the first 2. Martin and I talked about, I think that, again, Timmy, sometimes there's a delay depending on when the select board meetings happen, and sometimes he doesn't get paid until a couple weeks after it was probably due. However, that third one, is for week ending like July 18th, I think.
Yeah.
So it's, he'll get that on July 20th, so that's timely. And the following one not sure what was going on there, but I apologize, I should have pointed it out before you even got going. We pulled those second 2 out of the pile.
So the actual total is less.
I have 2 questions. One Mary's already asked. The Conservation Commission had the design work done for signage for some of the public spaces. And I just wanted to clarify the 2 buildings in here. One is one for design work and the other for the actual production of the sign.
Yeah, so there's one for 500, one for 300. Those are the graphic design. And then there's, I believe, 2 more, I think. That was the actual printing.
Okay.
So where are they now?
One is the Maja design and the other is Voss. I'm not sure which is which.
I'd have to pull it out and find it for you. But one was design, one was for printing. It needed to be processed before the end of the month and submitted. So.
The other question, either you or Martin can help me with, I was stopped on the 4th of July and asked why the Moonlighters check couldn't have been cut beforehand so the positions could have been played. Yes, I agree, I understand. But I tried to explain that, what the process was. But is there any change in that, Martin, at all from?
She hadn't performed yet, so we
Yeah.
tried to give the check when they performed, so we didn't have it till the 4th, and she told me also that she had forgotten to get asked for the funds ahead of time also, so.
Yeah, okay,
There's been times where we made special provisions for her,
okay.
but she came in, she presented that, and it was processed like 2 weeks prior.
Okay, thank you. Any other observations, changes, questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any? Okay, are there any adjustments to the agenda tonight? Okay. Hearing none, I'll go on to public comments. Are there any public comments? I have one. I would like to just publicly say thank you to the rec department, specifically John Leonard and John's rec committee, and the many volunteers that helped yesterday and leading up to the 4th of July. So It was quite the day, great weather, and I just want to publicly make sure we thank the rec committee. Moving on, the town plan update is next on the agenda. I would like to start to say there's been a lot of questions and opinions on this Sunnymead proposal for the farm stand. For us, this is premature. The application has been put to the environmental board, but at this point, that application is still being processed. So we don't really know how the outcome will be as far as a number of points, major, minor, and so on and so forth. Historically, the Planning Commission has represented the town with any thoughts on the town plan. So I imagine that will continue. I think I'll leave it at that, again, because it's a bit premature to really know what both the state and the environmental commissions, the Act 250 Commission will come out with. Any comments from my peers on that?
I do. So I think before the Act 250 Commission has a hearing, I'm not sure exactly of the whole process, but I think they would accept and maybe expect an opinion from the select board, because the project's in Hartland, and certainly the planning commission, the Hartland Planning Commission. But my understanding is we're not obliged to give an opinion, but we can, and maybe we should.
So, I know we have John here who's got some good knowledge on this,
On what?
on the 250 process.
Well, we're not really, I don't think we really need to go into the process.
No.
Is there any question on the process? It's really not the town process, it's really a state
It's a
process.
state process, and I just want to clarify one thing, that if it's deemed by Act 250, and John, please correct me if I'm wrong, as a minor project, in order to get a hearing, the town would have to request, someone would have to request a hearing. If it's deemed as a major project, then there would automatically be a hearing.
And so what qualifies it as one rather than the other?
Okay, that I don't know all the details on.
Yeah, and Mary, I'm not able to answer that. That's why I didn't want to venture into a discussion that we knew bits and pieces of, not really knowing what the full
No,
impact.
there are a lot of people here who are
Right.
interested in this.
Well, I asked for public comments. Are there comments specifically? Oh, yes, please. Come forward.
Well, where is forward? At the table. So if you found yourself offended by my comments, you can give me a call if you like, and I'll certainly give you an apology. I also want to take a moment and say that some of the private comments I've received on email I have resented, and I do hope some of those folks have had a chance to rethink about my character and what I'm up to. So I raise the issue because it seems that there are some things that the Board of Selectmen has the power to do, and one of them is to request a hearing. And I want to be sure that, and now I know you are aware of that, there is interest. As you may know, I grew up in that area, down at the foot of the hill in the red house. I have a pretty good understanding of the soils and those kinds of things there. I'm also aware of streams I fished in as a boy, and the development is inappropriate. The other thing I wanted to say was anybody ought to be able to sell gourds or pumpkins or tomatoes in their yard. We have a couple places up in North Hartland that do it, and that one of my neighbors on the Queechee Road sells some things, which seem to be perfectly appropriate activities for a farm. But to buy another piece of land and move the operation and include a deli, a bakery, an outside entertainment area, 45 parking lots beside a wetland, has its own requirements. And finally, I'd like the planning board to take a look at how the village is designated a village, what areas are rural, it's an RR. It escapes me what that means.
Rural residential.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That maybe there's some rural residential areas that ought to be rural down in the Lamb fields and the old Britain fields down in that corner. So I appreciate that you're vigilant, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I would also want to tell you, which you may be unaware of. I sat on the board in Windsor, Vermont when Ruth Carney Drive was created and the brewery and the whole thing, and there was quite an Act 250 process for that. It was difficult for me because I lived in Windsor at that time. Good friends of mine in Hartland disagreed with the project on an agricultural basis, and it became quite a thing. I would offer to you that that project came out pretty well, and the kinds of businesses that are down there are wonderful businesses. However, a convenience store, where it's proposed to be located, I believe, not only doesn't do much for the community when you add the other things in with it, but also, I will end there. I've gone on long enough, and I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll entertain a few more comments if people have them. Please.
I didn't know I was going to speak, so I have nothing prepared, but I do have some thoughts. My name is Jessica Bernard. I've lived here for 15 years. I live on Martinsville Road. I live right across from where this thing may be built. When the old farm was taken down and there's a lovely meadow, people were very enthusiastic about having it, and it seemed like a nice welcome into a small Vermont town. The picture that I saw is not, it was overwhelming. And I think part of what I've been thinking tonight is I'm sure you're all familiar with the story of the camel and the tent. And that's what I'm afraid of is going to happen.
Could you refresh our memories?
Well, the Arab and the camel are out in the desert and it's cold, and he sets up a little tent for himself, and the camel pokes his nose in and says, "It's really cold out here. Could I just put my nose in?" "Of course, put your nose in." 10 minutes later, "Gee, my shoulders are really cold. Do you think I could bring my shoulders in?" And slowly he creeps into the tent and pushes the Arab out into the cold. So it's just a question. It's like the frog in the boiling water. You know, if you don't pay attention, things happen before you realize they've happened. When I first saw those stakes in the ground, I called the town office. I called them about the big, huge transformers, saying, "What are these for?" And I was told that they were a backup to power to Hartland, which seemed a little odd, but I don't know anything about electricity, so I didn't say anything. When I asked about those stakes, I was told the guy wants to do a farmer's market. And I said, "Does that mean bricks and mortar?" And I was told, no, it doesn't. It's a seasonal thing. Well, it's no longer a seasonal thing. And when you see words like utilities put in there that are not clarified, I feel gas pumps. And I worry that although they say it's only gonna be open certain hours during the day, that those hours will extend and we'll pretty soon have truck stop 24 hours a day. So my concern is how do we speak up, those of us who care, to have a voice in, this is our town, we may not want this, we may be overvoted or whatever, but as long as we can speak, do we have the opportunity to do that?
If you're in a butter, I believe you would.
Excuse me, if you're what?
If your land is abutting
Yes, it
across
is.
the road, I believe you would. But general citizens do not have a role.
Oh, that's a pity. We all live here.
I'm sorry?
It's a pity we all live here, but
Yeah.
I'll take the abutment.
Yeah, and I'm not an Act 250 wizard, but I believe that's.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments?
Hi. Hi. Linda Genovese, I'm also in this area. I just have one question, is that concerning this woman's cause to have an abutter have a say in this, if it is a minor application or a major application, does that affect that we would have comment? That's what I think you were tending toward. I think a definition of whether it's a minor or a major, it needs to be set up at the beginning so that we would have.
That's yet to be determined by the commission at this point.
Okay, well, it's just that if the abutters are expressing concern now, let that be noted.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, the butters can also request a public hearing.
And do we know what the definition of an abutter is?
I believe it's,
Has to be touching the property.
Todd?
I was an Act 250 applicant, and mine was deemed a minor, and I still had to give notice to all my neighbors, and they had an opportunity to speak, so I don't know, unless something's changed, I would assume that would be the case.
Great.
I wanted to talk about something, because I tried to participate virtually last meeting, and there was some glitch with the thing, and there was some discussion about what way you're going with the town plan, whether you're gonna wait for whatever the planning commission's doing, whether you're gonna make your own decisions about what's best going forward. And there was a suggestion about my particular position made at that meeting, and I just wanna clarify something, which is, I do like the idea of a survey. I think it should have been done before. I think it should be done in the public. I think people should have an opportunity to comment on what the form is gonna be. It sounds like that's gonna be the case. I hope there's plenty of notice and plenty of time for people to be able to participate. If you're not gonna wait for that, I just want you, in thinking about the provision on no lodging in the rural areas, if you're going to adopt that, I don't think it should be viewed as if, which is my understanding of how it was represented at the last meeting, that the complaints were all about the Airbnb thing. Let's just pull that sentence out, pass this, see what the survey does, and fix it next time. I don't think it's a good idea. I gave you a letter a long time ago with reasons why I don't think it's a good idea to just have an outright ban, no matter how big, no matter how small the property, etc. And I think it's also unfair to pass on the survey on purpose, send it in, and then when the rules start being reconsidered by all of you or your employees, all of a sudden, when the authors of those rules aren't in control of them anymore, the survey becomes popular. So just philosophically, if you're gonna move forward with the town plan, you're the elected representatives, and I think you should make a decision about what you think is best for the plan based on whatever information you have available to you. But I don't think that the idea to just pull that piece out about the 2 bedrooms and Airbnb solves everything. I think it would be a mistake, and I also think it would be unfair since it wasn't really warned prior, specifically warned, as any ordinance or anything that's expected to be binding would have been warned in a town. And to just adopt that as if it's fine without thinking about it. So whatever position you come to is the position you come to, but I encourage you to think about it and make a decision on it, and not just, I don't think it's okay to just be like, all right, we'll leave that part in.
Sure, sure. Thank you. I mean, tonight's agenda for our discussion is really that hospitality and what we're doing about the rural area, and how do we look at that? Do we need a new definition and so on? So that's what we're going to be tackling tonight.
And the only other thing I'll just mention, I don't know if it's true or not, but the rumor circulating in the internet world prior to my arriving was that Sunnymead application was withdrawn anyway. I don't know if that's accurate, but
We would have more.
doesn't really affect you
information,
now.
So I haven't heard that. I'm
All right.
sure we would hear that. Okay, any other immediate comments on?
Helen's got her hand up online.
Thank you. Helen?
Helen Esmond.
You also have the power to unmute.
Oh, well, I don't dare go near that button.
Okay, now it says I'm unmuted, okay? So the one thing I want to say is I had my hand up before. The question I had during the first initial, right after the adjustments to agenda was, are you no longer accepting public comments at the ends of the meetings as you had at a few times during previous meetings when I had my hand up and no one responded to it? And the second thing is, with the town plan, I don't think it's a good thing to accommodate someone who comes into the town with the proposed plan. I think that the town plan should be as it is for the whole town, not for someone who comes in with money to build something and it's not in the proper, you don't call it zones up here. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Whoever's sitting on the side, Jay, they already had their hand up. I don't know if
Okay,
they
yes,
can't
please.
see. I just saw a hand.
Good,
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rebecca Genovese. That's my mom, and I grew up in the red house that 82 Shires built up. In addition to fishing poles, I can tell you where a blind dog will end up more than once down that river course, which embankments are prone to being steep overhangs that you shouldn't camp near, and how to find lost calves and things like that. When I grew up in that red house, it was a neighborhood of 7 or 8 families of kids. And it really makes me sad that it's now being viewed as nothing but a highway exit. People have lived and farmed in that neighborhood for hundreds of years. It's where the original settlers to town came, up the river. I personally was really sad when that barn went away. I was sad that didn't somehow make somebody's endangered barn list. If you'd seen the microburst that destroyed half a forest on Clay Hill Road that at the same time knocked over everything across the street, that barn stood. It was nice to have it cleaned up, sure. But we don't kowtow just because of that. This is not an on-farm business. This, I don't really believe, was ever intended to be as it was circulated town-wide. Whenever you asked anyone, and I have asked for years, all the way up through to their farm manager, what's going on? This is my home neighborhood that is been told to me. I've been to the planning commission meetings. I asked about a budding notice. It hasn't actually happened. Maybe that's premature. I think there's some fuzziness in that. That would be good to clarify, yes. But this is a neighborhood. This is a residential neighborhood. All those beautiful open fields that people stop and take pictures of. You see people posing in wedding dresses. People stop all the time. They watch the fireworks. The fireworks were beautiful from my parents' fire pit last night. Coincidentally, we looked right through that space at the fireworks in town, actually. And for me, it was really sad because that could all go away.
sure, we got some hours on this thing, but I think we need to recognize that there's actually 13 or 14 abutters when the leaves are down that will see this property, that will hear this property 24/7 with industrial scale lighting, more than apparently 7,500 square feet of constant industrial hum from refrigeration and air conditioning and freezers, and we don't know, right? I think this was very purposefully sort of brought this far, kind of pretending that it was an itty bitty project. And I just want to call that out in the open really honestly, that I'm nervous about that. And I want you to be nervous about that. Because that's an abuse of our democratic system. That's an abuse of our democratic process for building. That's a completely going around our town planning process. And I'm not okay with that. And nobody should be okay with that in favor of a better sandwich. I think that's really offensive. I think that you're looking at single-family homes. I think you're looking at a bunch of people, and John, you could probably attest to the fact that I don't think people's property values go up when a commercial entity moves into a residential neighborhood. I don't think that holds to be true. In addition to the hours that they've stated to open, which may or may not expand, you're talking about early morning deliveries. You're talking about 6+ months of plowing and parking lot and care and maintenance. That all makes noise, folks. It has beeping, it has lights. When they eventually need security at our town's expense. If you're a kid of the 80s, when Mr. Singer was in charge, you remember that Exit 9 was kind of like a nightly disco with the police cars, pulling people over for speeding and running the stoplights and this, that, and the other. That's what it's going to be like again. This doesn't belong there. This is an industrial scale meat market, posing as something else for as long as it can. And I really think we need to be a bit more heads up about this. And I'm sad that we would trade that beautiful entry corridor that's been protected by the Lamb family for a reason. Those beautiful protected fields in that entry corridor, that no matter what your acreage is, what your personal address is, or what your personal acquisition value is, you all get to drive through that and enjoy that every day on your way home. And that will go away. And I think that's more important than one person's maximizing profit over a land purchase that they assumed they could bend the rules to do what they wanted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. We talked about the short-term rentals, and let's talk a little bit. I would like very much to talk about the concept of how do we address what's going on in the rural areas as far as enterprises that are not considered to be home enterprises. We introduced or received some language from the work that was done by Sean and Kevin Geiger and some with Dave. And it tries to tackle the growing interest in having income from residential land that isn't necessarily directly from the sale of an agricultural product. Clyde and I had a couple of parking lot chats after one of our last meetings, and I think we identified 5, 6, 7 places in town that over the many years took summer borders, including the Bedell property, had people come up to really train. Clay Hill Road certainly had a number of properties. Hoisington Farm had, I hesitate because were they guest boarders, but I want to sort of just throw that out as a way to frame that we're here today and we have people that are looking to gain enough income to sort of live and pay their property taxes, some to just supplement the property taxes, and others just to preserve some land. So with that, why don't we sort of just begin to talk a little bit about that idea. Jim, I'm very aware of your comments, and we'll consider that after we get through this discussion. Do you want to have any clarifying comments, Dave?
As I started off last meeting regarding hospitality, you know, in the present plan draft from March 11th, it has a home business for lodging, and it talks about you know, capping out at 8 to 10 people, whether that be guests and employees, depending on how you mix and match that. So again, we did have public comments. We took them seriously. We had a comment that you know, it's very difficult to run a bed and breakfast. I think that for the moment we'll stick with bed and breakfasts or inns as part of this conversation. Very difficult to do that profitably with just 8 to 10 people, 4 to 5 basically rooms. So we took a look at this, and the language that we came up with, you know, we asked whether it's possible to have a commercial entity that is reliant upon the rural area for a lot of its, you know, what makes it up as a commercial entity. So, you know, the reliance, you know, again would be, let's look at an inn or a B&B, you know, on Hartland Hill, you know, for instance, that is situated, you have the trees, the fields, and, you know, again, the rural area, the rural aspect of the business is what makes up the backbone of this business. We kind of also took a look at this and said, you know, a lot of the town plan, you know, specifies, you know, the desire to have the rural area be agriculture, or to have it, you know, that agricultural scenic aspect to it. And part of, you know, putting this into writing, you know, we also asked the question that farming is not on the upswing. You know, it is on the downswing. You know, cows and farms are becoming less and less. And it's harder to make, you know, money and to keep that land open. So is there a, you know, again, a commercial business that is going to help preserve that rural character? You know, if a B&B is on 10 acres and 8 of those acres are kept open, you know, and the other 2 acres or 3 acres.
What's the impetus? Like, where does who generated the goal? You know, what's the goal here for the town?
I see the goal as trying to look forward as to how Hartland should be. I mean, our planning commission has been wrestling and working with that on and on and on. I think as we know in the state of Vermont, there's a housing crisis. You know, my own daughter couldn't find a place to live in Hartland, so they had to look elsewhere. I'm not talking about housing, we're talking about people who have rural land that can gain income from some supplemental way that would include lodging.
Right, but that's not going to help the housing issue.
Not necessarily, but I'm sort of saying that all of that has been sort of right front and center.
But where is the consensus that this is the right direction to go for the town?
That is your discussion tonight?
And Jim, that's why we're here.
Yeah, okay.
So-
No, I'm just trying to understand if
No,
if
so-
there's some type of impetus that's, you know, driving this, or if it's
So,
just an open discussion.
the exercise was you got feedback, you know, on the town plan, so you had a town plan update,
Yeah.
you know, and, we had a public hearing, we got, so I thought, you know, I think I heard from the board, and the discussion in, you know, the community, you got some decent feedback. We said, okay, instead of trying to just hash this out from square one, we'll put together some language,
Right.
and we'll respond to this, and we will bring this back for a discussion to the select board, which is what we're here tonight.
Yeah.
Part of the language that we put together here, again, you know, you have a home business lodging. So is there perhaps something that can still take place in the rural area, still benefit the rural area, still keep it open, but be a step bigger than the home business lodging, which is the 8 to 10 and 75% floor space? You know, can there be something that, you know, fits this, but can make someone revenue enough to offset, you know, the barns, or, you know, if they put up the cabins? Again, there is language in here that, you know, talks about how many rooms you can have and how many dwellings you can have. But, you know, does that concept, you know, can you have something greater than that home occupation lodging, which is a commercial entity that provides enough revenue to, you know, maintain the barns, keep open 50, 60 acres, or even just 10?
But that line in that plan doesn't apply to the rural areas, it applies to rural residential.
Right.
Explain?
That line that you're quoting in the draft that was given to us by the planning commission
No,
applies to rural.
we're talking the May 23rd,
Yeah,
the May 23rd draft.
right, but I think what you're saying, you're looking at the lodging statement that came from the planning commission.
Correct, in the March 11th
Which
draft.
applied to home businesses.
Yeah, home business
Which
lodging
applies to rural residential areas.
and rural areas.
Yeah, that's the way it's written. Well, maybe.
It applies, you made a home occupation and a home business for the rural area, and
You're right.
others.
Small enterprises do not apply to rural areas.
small enterprise is, that's a different beast.
And that's what we tackled last time.
So when we had the comments back, we said, hey, you know, that 8 to 10, you know, what we heard is small and perhaps unprofitable unless you're just a retiree. Can there be something that can be bigger, but not necessarily be detrimental to the rural area?
So are people in the town gravitating towards this? I mean, is this what the town is wanting?
Jim, why don't, you're asking very good questions.
Yeah,
I'm really not sure
it's just
where
hard.
you're going with this.
I'm not sure I'm going it either,
Yeah.
but I mean, you know, the observation I'll make is that, you know, we need to set policy, and then we need to have the policy written into the document.
Right.
It feels a little backwards right now, because we're writing policy into the document and saying, hey, how about this? So that process is a little confusing to me. But
I'm not taking any more comments.
On that note, then, do you like it, do you not like it? If you don't like it, why not? If you like it, why? You know, that's the discussion.
I'm trying to figure it out.
Okay.
Right. And when I look at, so I'm trying to understand,
Yeah.
what does the public at large want for the town? Right?
Well, we don't know that.
The last test we have of what the public at large wants for the town is the last survey that's done. And until we have a new survey, I'm not saying we should wait for a new survey, so don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is, in the absence of another survey, that's the last piece of data that we have. And if I read that survey, it sounds like most people want to keep Hartland, quote unquote, the way it is. Keep it rural, right? Keep it scenic.
Well,
Yeah, I'm
is
not
that,
sure.
Jim, is that not what we're talking about right
Yeah,
now?
but I'm just not sure. You know, so I'm trying to weigh the pros and cons here in a rational way. I'm not sure that opening up rural areas to commercial development fits that goal. if that's the town goal. Now, if the town says, no, we need more commercial development in rural areas, then it's a totally different discussion.
Well, we have to be careful about what terms we're using. When you say commercial development,
Well, that's what we're doing. You know, in the plan is delivered, small enterprises, right, which is small, non-retail commercial businesses. Those small, non-retail commercial businesses were not part of the rural area. They were rural residential, they were, what's the other, industrial, you could be there, you could be.
what I believe it says, lodging, forestry, agricultural, low noise, outdoor recreation.
Well, you're reading the change, I'm talking about the original language that was supplied to us.
Okay.
So I think the board needs to understand what language you're looking at. You know, we're talking, because there's other change, March, May 23rd.
You know this already, I'm just struggling, right, I really am struggling with whether it's helpful to the town and whether we're going in the right direction. Rewriting land use at this table.
Mandy, are you, have some comments, and then Mary, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is when we start limiting, like, what people can do, and I may be off and I'm having a hard time with which document we're on and which update and which change. So if we're talking about for Airbnb type lodging, I guess one of the biggest things is if folks are following what says on their septic permit, how are we going to even enforce that? How is that enforceable? Who does that? And if you write it in a document, then it has to become enforceable by someone. And who is that person if we put it in the document? Because that's my biggest.
So at the moment, we're not talking the Airbnb type. We're talking about a bed and breakfast, which in and of itself is a commercial entity. It was in a house, it was, received an Act 250 permit as a home occupation with 16 people. So you've already allowed for commercial use in a rural area. So the Airbnb is residential, by definition. Very similar, the two Bs are close. The B&Bs are, just classified differently. So it can be, a house with, the difference is that you would have a shared space, the common room, the living room is a shared
But you're
space.
still gonna have a set number of bedrooms within the home, and I could be, wrong here, but when you apply for a septic permit, when you're building the property, you apply for it based on the number of occupants, which is based on the number of rooms,
So you are correct, a B&B, even a B&B would be limited by
The number of
concept
rooms.
that it can have.
Right. So I guess that's my
Sure.
take on it.
And then we're also, I believe, putting on the table, if someone wants to build additional lodging facilities, and they meet the septic requirements, what do we say about that as a town plan?
And I would say too, not for or against, but if you have a strong town plan, right, with reasonable restrictions, you protect yourself. If you weaken it, you're not protected. Now, if a proposal comes in, and it sounds like a good proposal for the town, the planning commission is not required to oppose it in an Act 250 process, right? They can choose not to. But if you don't have strong language to protect the town, you have nowhere to go.
Jim, let's just be clear though. If it goes to Act 250 and the application goes in, whether the planning commission is there or not, and Peter Gregory said this last week when he was here and you acknowledged the statement that he said. Criteria 10 is how does this conform to the town plan? So if the planning commission doesn't say boo, the environmental commission, the board is going to read this and determine, whether it conforms or not. So even if the planning commission doesn't oppose it, Doesn't mean criteria 10 goes away.
Right.
You're still bound by the town plan. And vice versa, the planning commission can get up there all day long and say it doesn't conform. And the environmental commission is gonna read the darn thing and they may say, yes, it does. And they may approve it. It depends on the reading of the town plan and how the environmental board reads it.
Right. And some of the points that were brought out earlier, there are 9 other points in this criteria, including wetlands and so on. So that review process is to some degree bigger than the town. Harry, thoughts?
Yes, of course I have thoughts. So I think this all became urgent, or seemed to be urgent, because the Sunnymead project came up, and it seemed like it could go through unless the town plan was somehow changed. But the Act 250, their Act 250 application's already been submitted, so the Act 250 Commission will look at their application, Sunnymead's application, based on our current town plan. All right? So our current town plan doesn't expire until 2025. So I don't see any urgency to treat this as an emergency. We can ask the planning commission to do a survey, which they're probably already planning on doing, get feedback from the community, and then proceed with changes, updates to the town plan. I don't see, I mean, we've got 3 years.
Mary, I need a clarification on that, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but according to which town plan?
2017.
The parcel that we're talking about is what?
2017.
Commercial or not, though?
I
That is
don't-
rural residential in the plan
You know
you're
what,
working off or not?
I actually don't know, but
That seems
right
important to
now,
know.
what we're
Rebecca,
doing right
but
now
this-
is this is our discussion. We already had public discussion, and as a team, we need to work this out based on what you've talked to us about. But we really need to hammer this out, and I appreciate everybody's input, but we need the time now to hammer this out, okay? So thank you.
But I would agree that our current 2017 plan is good until May of 2025. That's accurate.
So let's say the survey comes in, and then we go from there. I'm not even sure why we're agonizing over this.
Well, there's a couple of ways to go. One, we can continue on the process. We still have a public hearing would be coming up. And should we have comments back from a survey, the public hearing, we can sort of vote to table it and just send it back to the planning commission. Or we could sort of incorporate the things that we talk about, discuss, and feel are the best to move forward, including the various administrative changes that have been proposed. And then we're back to reworking the town plan. So I see those as 2 options. You know, there's overhead and expense either way we go.
And I'm sorry if I offended the public. This is our only opportunity to discuss a topic as a board, because we can't talk in more than twos about any of these topics. Okay, so this is it right here. And this is a serious task, and I feel that we really need the 5 of us to hash it out, so.
Right. Thank you. Clyde, your thoughts?
As Mary says, we've got to basically discuss it amongst ourselves and throw out ideas and not. We appreciate the input, but still, in the long run, it's going to be us working back and forth and working out little disagreements, like, is an Airbnb different than a B&B? It's still bed and breakfast, it's just how you advertise it, basically. I mean, and you're not gonna have a B&B if you stick a sign up beside the road that says B&B and have any business. So, unless you've got something to offer that nobody else has, but you just got to beat this thing out and come up with a good thing to present. So,
And it's not the Sunnymead that we're really talking about here. We're really trying to talk about lodging and hospitality at this juncture. Unless it's a point of clarification, I really want to stick to what we said before.
I think it's a matter of scale, what you're talking about. Is it one?
Is it clarification, or I don't understand the word scale?
I'm sorry, I'd like to have some input, and I can't, so go ahead.
Are you going to sort of?
No, I'm just.
I'm asking if you're going to have a point of clarification.
I'm a member of the planning commission, and I wanted to bring something up.
Well, please do.
Thank you. I think what you're talking about is, as far as the rentals, and as far as opening up the rural areas to, commercial, is a matter of scale.
Correct.
I don't think anybody's got a problem.
Right.
And you have to make the decision, or hopefully in conjunction with the planning commission, as a cooperative effort, to determine what that scale is, and whether that's as a result of the survey, or just a decision as part of that has to be made. But nobody's saying, I don't think that we shouldn't have it. It's a matter of scale, and how big it should be.
Thank you, John, because that's ultimately what we're asking here. We've gotten off track to sort of say who's driving it, but if the concept is good, then we need to sort of say, are we talking people? Are we talking rooms? Or how many acreage? What's the relationship of the open land to what we're doing? And a number of things. So thank you. Stu?
Yeah, my name's Stuart Farnham. You want me to come up there? Just a point of clarification on something that David said. David, if I may quote, farming is on the downsizing, cows are less and less. Cows are not less and less. The state has about the same as it had many, many years ago. Right. And they're being pushed out of rural areas like this because of pricing. People are willing to pay more for housing lots than farmers can afford to pay for a farm. And our hillsides aren't very productive in the comparison to a flat land on the other side of the state in Addison County or in Franklin County. So it is harder to farm in this area, but people are still doing it. So I would really appreciate people sticking to the facts and saying that farming is not on the downsizing.
Farming has challenges.
Yes, it does.
And I think from your role with the Farm Bureau, I'm sure you're very aware of that. And I appreciate your efforts to keep farming in Vermont going the way it's been. So thank you.
And just in case anybody else doesn't know, I am the secretary of the Windsor County Farm Bureau. And I'm also a farm insurance salesman.
Okay. John brought up really what I was trying to sort of get to tonight. Thank you. Because really it's a matter of if this idea that we see coming and how do we handle it, of people looking to generate income from the rural nature of the land by having guests, how do we control that? How do we make sure that it works? We had a proposal by 10 acres. You know, for every 10 acres, you could have so many lodging rooms. Is every 10 acres the same? So I have a lot of heads that are looking down right now, so I'm not sure.
So with
We've
that,
exhausted this topic.
I'm just trying to think, like, what are our options to go forward, you know, because we either deliberate on the details of each one of these things, or we, you know, what are our options? How do we move forward from here? And Mary brought up a great point. That's where I'm kind of at about which direction.
You have some comments?
so the hospitality, the two biggest things to kind of get your arms around is the concept of something more than just a home business. And if you're okay with kind of that concept, you know, then the next one is scale, and it's a little bit more detailed. You know, and there's some other details, but I think that if you take that step, whether it's positive or negative, then I think that you're 85% there on the hospitality. You know, those two questions in and of itself. And if it's scale is the next step, Phil, as you said, you know, in this language, and it's, you know, it's not set in stone, it's to say, hey, you know, here's some language and toss it around, is for 10 acres, there's, you know, 4 lodging rooms, or 1 dwelling. And it, as you have more, you know, kind of that concept that, well, if you have more acreage, then, you know, one, you're gonna need, you know, more revenue, or you're gonna have more overhead, but also on 60 acres, you know, 15 rooms, you know, will maybe fit in better than on 5 acres. So we put in that sliding scale. Now, when we put this together, there was some recognition that, okay, if someone's got 200 acres, you know, 20 times 4, you get into like 80 rooms, if I did the math correct. Then, you know, we could sit there and say, geez, you know, that sounds like it would be a lot, you know. So it sounded like maybe on the larger end, you know, you may want to talk about a cap of some sort. You know, and then yet the 4 rooms per 10 acres kind of comes back to that home occupation or home business lodging of 8 to 10 people. You know, where 4 rooms on 10 acres may not,
They're gonna be honest with you,
may not be enough.
the math is just confusing, you know? I
So,
don't know about you guys.
bear with me, just let me finish, please. So, 10 acres, 4 rooms, 20 acres, 8 rooms. So it allows for that, you know, it's just not so strict. It allows for some flexibility, which is also another thing that we heard back, was some flexibility in the process.
But who heard that from who?
We heard back from the public.
2 public people, 3 public people?
Or whatever it was, is the public, so.
Because I mean, the public is, you know, 3,400 people.
So that's what we'll have the survey.
So, and just, I know it's old data, but I think it's the last question, the last survey says, you know, how do you prefer to see Hartland going forward? 70% said maintain the present mix of residential, business, and agriculture. 44% said be primarily a rural residential community. 28% said encourage home occupations, not commercial occupations. And then 19% said encourage and attract more commercial or business growth. So I'm just trying to figure out, you know, why we collectively, or if we collectively think we really need to push commercial growth into the rural areas. Maybe we do, maybe there's a benefit to the town.
You know, you keep using this term, which for me has all these negative connotations, but pushing commercial growth.
I mean, it is what it is. All we're doing is picking the winners and losers. We're saying this commercial enterprise is a winner, and then something else is a loser.
Interesting. Could I back away for a moment? I think you're probably familiar with a decision-making model where we take a vote to make sure we're kind of a barometer of where we are right now. And we just had a suggestion you know, are we talking the concept or are we talking scale? And we're beginning to mix the two little bit together. So what I would ask you to be thinking about is if you're really enthusiastic about the concept of let's go and explore this, work out the scale and see what it means, that's a 1. If you agree, simply, that's a 2. If you have minor reservations and generally agree, and I'll actively support the idea of let's keep talking about it, that's a 3. 4, I have serious reservations, and 5, I know I'm going to say no. So I'm just wondering if 1, enthusiastically agree, 2, I agree, 3, I have some reservations, let's keep talking to work it out. 4, I still have some reservations and not so sure. 5 is it's done. So,
But are we talking specifically about?
For the concept.
Of rural enterprises?
Correct. Right.
So you want our votes now?
Yeah.
3.5.
You took my number. I took 3.75.
I don't see that on my scale.
All right, I'll say 3. How about that?
3, okay.
I'm right between 3 and 4, to be completely honest. I'm
Okay.
like, sorry.
Yes,
3 of us, 4, maybe 3 to 4.
3 to 4, somewhere in there.
That's
You
4
know,
of us. that are-
It all depends on what is proposed.
So that's why I'm asking, should we keep talking about it? And if you say 3 or above, but my sense is that, you know, we have reservations, but let's keep talking about it.
Right.
Okay.
I might have a question for, when you're talking about how many rooms you're gonna have available anywhere though, and John could probably back me up or clarify this, it all depends on what the septic system says, right? Because they're based on number of bedrooms, right?
Well, yeah, but if you've got an area where you can put 100 units,
Well, true.
with septic, then you need the cap to determine what you want to see. So, you have to be a little bit careful in allowing the septic capacity to drive the scale of the development.
But there are certain parts of town you couldn't build an outhouse and you'd go.
No, that's very true, but you may find some that, you know, you have some fields with some soil and now, over the years, they've developed new septic systems and sand filters and wastewater filters to be able to put systems today where we couldn't put them years ago. So, like I said, I don't think you should let the size of the septic system drive the scale of the project. The scale of the project should be determined as to what you want limits in the rural residential areas, or the rural areas to be. I mean, do you want a 50, 100 unit hotel or motel or whatever you want to call it? I mean, they shroud all these things in all these different names that, to make it sound pretty, but by and large, it's a large-scale project.
And a great location will be right next to the Ashcore Bog.
What will?
A great location for the hotel will be right next to the Ashcore Bog, which would be allowable.
Todd, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to point out, I want to take Jim's question and turn it on its head.
Excellent.
In 2017, my lodging property in a rural area existed. It's allowed by the town plan. It was allowed by the Ottaquiche plan. He keeps saying 1 person, 2 persons. Yeah, there are 2 lodging people in town right now. We're both opposed to it. However, what he proposes is to use the language that the Planning Commission just came up with. That's a handful of people in a room without a survey. He's changing. He wants to change what existed in 2017. He says people want to leave things as they are. I existed, I was allowed in 2017. If you're going to table this until the next survey, which is fine with me, as long as the survey has specific questions about lodging that makes sense, that's fine, but go back to the 2017 language, because otherwise you're writing policy that's just from a handful of people in a room with no public notice whatsoever. So in my mind, your decision is come up with new lodging language that you like, or go back to 2017 until you have a survey. But the idea that you would take the planning commission's new version, which was hidden on page 95, and use that when nobody had an opportunity to see about it or know anything about it, I think is a mistake and unfair. And to use the survey saying, the last time we had a survey, this was fine. The last plan allowed rural lodging, as does the regional plan.
Right. Well, I think that's a valid point.
Jim, can I?
So, I
Jim,
I appreciate
may I-
Todd's point, I think it's very valid. I do think that the planning commission did not work behind the scenes, those are public hearings.
Right, but you're gonna warrant a rule that you expect to be binding on Act 250, and I believe that was intentional.
Well, I don't think the planning commission.
So, Jim, I'll just say to Todd, I don't see any malfeasance. Was it in secret? And no. Were they public meetings? They were warned. Were they well attended? No. But thank you for your comments, because I think that does put in context that.
It's a major change with no notice.
But I think it's reasonable to discuss that. You know, maybe you do go back to the 2017 language. I think that's reasonable to put on the table.
I think you only have two choices. You either go back to 2017 or you come up with your own language. But to take the new language that came from a room where there was no discussion of it on a notice.
But Jim, and I'm going to ask Todd to sort of say thank you. That's what we're talking about is new language in this area right now. So we're trying, I think, to recognize whether it's 1, 2. In my sort of gut, I feel this is something that is coming. So as select board people that are charged to think about vision and policy as the planning commission is, that's why I would like to sort of have this discussion. I'm very conscious of the time. We have many more agenda items. Can we maybe just for 5 more minutes wrestle with this, or have we?
I do have one more question.
Yeah.
To Jay, John, do you have plans to send out a survey?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought.
If you read our minutes that were posted today,
Yeah.
you'll see the story.
I felt like I should read them, but.
Yeah, I was quite surprised to see them. Thank you, Jay. Normally they are not distributed. I too did not have a chance to read it before tonight, so I will. I'll get them.
Yeah, that's good news, thank you.
Okay, should we just go on for now?
And can I just say one more thing? The planning commission works really hard on behalf of all of us, and I really appreciate their work. They're volunteers, and it's not fun what they do. Although, maybe you find it fun, I don't know, but I appreciate what you do. Thank you.
I mean, and seriously, I think Todd has a good point here. It may be reasonable, and I would like input from the planning commission, right? But it might be reasonable to take out the 2 sections that refer, the one line that refers to short-term rentals, the other line that refers to lodging, in home business.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if that's the path of least resistance.
Sure.
So we get to the next survey, just take them out.
Yeah, okay. Is the old term something for us to chew on for a little bit.
But, we do have until, January 4th before this plan is automatically rejected.
Yeah.
By statute.
So this will come.
But we still have the 2017 to rely on for another.
Yeah. And I think, I hope everyone sees in the room that it's hard for us to sort of begin a conversation without everyone wanting to jump in. And believe me, I do value the input, and I want to hear, because I'm not a professional planner. Actually, I don't know too many people in the room that are. So, you're pointing to someone, Sean. Oh, thank you. Sean, I didn't see you. See you behind me?
I didn't see him either.
Okay. Okay, then let's just move on.
That's fine.
Okay. Our next really easy project discussion or all business is the ARPA funding. So if folks would like to stay and hear that discussion, that's great. The general public may not know that the town submitted a proposal to a state agency for a funding, for a study, a project proposal for a study to see if the project was feasible for various ADA work at the rec center. Unfortunately, just about a week ago, that project was rejected with the reason given the state has been moving monies out of that particular department's budget to solve the housing crisis. So as we begin our ARPA discussion tonight, the board has that in mind as to what we need to wrestle with. I mean, at the last meeting, we were focusing on Damon Hall, I believe, is the top priority, and we were going to begin to sort of come to a point where we hand it over to Dave and his team to sort of say, okay, can you go and get some operational costs and help us understand what the various, how to fix the various problems that are associated with Damon Hall. Well, now we have the rec center to contend with as well at the same time. And then throw in the pieces that we've recognized where our $200,000 paving budget isn't going to meet the needs of the quote that came in to pave the western side of Clay Hill Road. Never mind, the eastern side of Clay Hill Road was even more astronomically more expensive. So we're wrestling with using ARPA monies for that. We have the Dennyville Culvert project that we've talked about. And then one of the monkeys in the room is the Three Corners intersection. When we have new quotes, how do we sort of decide whether to use ARPA money to sort of meet those needs because of the potentially variable budget, or do we stop that project? Lots of big decisions. But tonight I would like to sort of just focus on the two town buildings and to see if we're have a general discussion about what we think are priorities within those buildings based on some of the paperwork that we've been given, the reports that we've been given. And then if we're ready to turn it over to Dave to say, let's go and do the operational, to get some price tags for it.
And appreciate the two documents that you sent, that kind of historical stuff in there, some of which was done, but I'm sure the prices on the rest is more than those guys.
And I noticed, let me just make sure people know what we're talking about. We have reports from December 2017. They're both December of 2017 by an engineering firm that looked at both the rec building and Damon Hall. The piece that I noticed right off is they're both exterior. There's nothing on the interior side. And obviously, some of the interior problems that we're having, like water penetration here, are being caused by the exterior. Any other general comments before I ask Dave to?
I'll just say that I saw you there, I got the opportunity to walk through the rec center on Old Home Day. And yeah, boy, both of these buildings need some serious work.
Yeah. Any other general comments? Okay. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about what?
Yeah, I just want to, so I'm at the point where kind of nudged Phil the last time we spoke going into this meeting that, you know, you're at kind of a policy level and to, you know, we're starting to get midsummer here, kind of hope you to push that over into the operation. mode, basically in the town manager's hands, and try and get this going, and get really the top priorities out of you so I can start moving on that. On the rec center, in speaking with Two Rivers, you know, there's a chance, and I may be speaking to him this week or next week, the gentleman that is kind of the face of the grant for the ADA access and where the funding is, and, you know, the next funding period is, I think, is in November. But it's still a high probability that we don't get it. So I think that at this point, again, in the spirit of just kind of moving this over, I think that, you know, the top priorities, and some of this is in, you know, doesn't mean that we give up on the ADA access grant, but, you know, we need to start moving forward on it. And I don't know really what that looks like, other than that we can sit here for the next 3 years and say, what if, you know, maybe this, you know, well, let's see what happens. You know, that's November, and then we got Three Corners, which we won't know until, you know, March, April. You know, at that point, we've lost, you know, basically a whole year on the ARPA funding, and it just becomes that much more difficult to get the bigger projects done. So, you know, we talked about Damon Hall. I would, as you town manager, basically say, look, the rec center, how can we not, you know, address this at this point in time? You know, it's been 22 years since we, you know, was installed. It hasn't worked from day one, you know, and it's time to rectify that. And some of the other major things that are in this study, it was a quality study by an engineer. You know, if we stick to, you know, some of that, and basically it's a lot of the same problems on Damon Hall, I think that those are most likely, I don't want to go out on a limb, you know, I think that those are doable projects and doable expenses. And then we can kind of look at some of the other stuff and just get a feel for, you know, what else is it with these buildings, and, you know, what the cost may be, and you know, kind of go from there. But let me just say 3 things. I would say give me upwards to 4 priorities. You know, I've got 2 others off of this list that, you know, were in the top 5 to 7. And say, let's kind of try and move forward on these.
You mean just related to the buildings?
No, 4, Damon Hall Rec Center being 2.
Okay.
I'll just throw out Jennyville Culvert being a 3rd. And perhaps, you know, looking into a study for Queechee Road. Even if...
Study on Queechee Road, is that
for paving and the base of the road. I'll just say that if infrastructure money comes down the pike, it's not going to come
Is
directly.
that the second half of the paving project?
Oh, I'm sorry. So Queechee Road is, second half of the paving project is Clay Hill.
It just remind me, what distance is that roughly?
Clay Hill?
Yeah, that we haven't allocated money for.
I don't remember the distance.
Mile
It's,
and a half.
what is it?
It's about a mile and a half.
Mile and a half.
For the whole thing, or just the part that we haven't
That's
funded?
from Route 5 up to where it stops just before Fairview Farms.
Correct.
So we funded a portion of it, maybe we have a mile left to fund.
Well, we're actually this year talking about the other portion.
Right.
The portion that takes off from the Queechee Road and heads east.
And that's $470,000.
375 or thereabouts.
Okay.
So that would be done next summer. From Queechee Road to the dirt road on Clay Hill is going to be done sometime between today and the end of Columbus Day. So I think those are doable things with ARPA money. We've got to look out for the overages on the paving and the Three Corners intersection, and we need to keep the nest egg there. If we can do those things in the ARPA money and there's more left over, we can find something to do with the more left over. If we get into this and we get 2/3 of the way through and we're like, we don't have enough ARPA money, I would just like to remind the board that we do have, and Jim and Clyde, this is why we have those reserve funds. We do have that $450,000 capital project fund left over from the oil spill that we have not tapped into.
Separate from the highway reserve.
Separate from the highway.
general Fund reserve.
Separate from the highway, separate from the fund balance. This is capital projects that was intended for things just like this,
Yeah.
that we just haven't identified. I think the ARPA committee identified, actually identified 15 of these things. So there is a little bit of buffer if,
So ARPA gets us to 1,040,000, and then the reserve that you're talking about gets us to almost $1 million.
if you're like, hey, you know, your ARPA will take care of all the drainage, but for 300 grand more, you can do, you know, lighting or whatever it wants to do. Or if we're capable of doing this, you know, and then it's like, you know, I really wanted to see priority number 5. You know, there was a committee for that fund. There was some suggestions, they never really came to materialize, but I just want to say that if on these things that we're looking at, gobble up the million where we need something, there's that capital project fund money. That being said, but that needs to go to the voters. And I think that, you know, if we are doing this legwork, if we're looking into, you know, if we have, I'm just gonna throw it out, we have an architect who will get the rec center and look at Damon Hall, and, you know, he comes up with, you know, a scope and something that we can put out. You know, we can use that money in the ARPA money, that's great. I think that the overs in the 3 corners and, you know, the paving and all that stuff, you know, we can look towards ARPA at that, but just if we come through that architectural study and it's like, we find that 400 grand would be very beneficial to finish a project or to take on project number 5, which may be somebody's pet project here, then, you know, I don't think we should forget that, you know, but the ARPA money is time sensitive, and, you know, at this point, we've got 4 years to do it, and, you know, some of this work is not quick, and we need to start weeding out what we can do and what we can't do, and, you know, some of this, you know, we may find out, you know, there's no way in heck we can do that, and we need to move on to like priority number 2. But we're not gonna find that out until we start kicking the tires here.
Yeah. So what do you need? Like, what are you really asking for?
Your top 4 priorities. I'm looking for the policy, I'm looking for the policy decision here, so you can kick it over to me so I can start pushing this
I
together.
think there's probably some reasonable, you know, contained categories here, right? I mean, in my mind, the building maintenance is a easily measurable chunk, right? The culvert is an easy measurable chunk, right? I don't see any reason to not move forward with those. I mean, the hard thing about the buildings is you've got some work to do to figure out for each building, what are the priority projects that fit into that $250,000, right? And if you have to come back and you say, you know, 250 isn't gonna quite cut it, we need 50 more, then we've got some decisions to make about, does that 50 come out of ditching, or does it come out of, you know, reserve, or, you know, where does it come from?
That's been, so that's 2 thought processes. I'm not sure I'm, you know, I don't think I have an issue with either way you go, whether it's just you prioritize money towards chunks or you prioritize the projects themselves. I think, you know, whatever number you come up with, I can tell you based upon these studies that the drainage in both of these buildings, including the ADA access, as far as the buildings go, are the absolute priorities for the 2 buildings.
Right, yeah.
Including
You gotta get
this sidewalk out here, the door, and just the whole, how this whole system is. This always kind of comes back to, you know, there's always a fork in the road that I come back to the board and say, okay, which way do you guys want to go? We can do money and say, look, this is going to be 450 instead of 250. I can work with that. I guess the project and says, so I can leave sometime soon and say, okay, I need to start, I need to start moving forward on the buildings. And it would also be beneficial to me to know that, okay, the Jennyville culvert and say the Queechee Road, are also in that mix. I can start kind of putting the pieces in together. Because if we wait a year and a half for the prices to come back on the buildings, well, it's gonna be really difficult for me to turn around and say, okay, the buildings are too expensive, so let's go ahead and do the Jennyville culvert.
Yeah. So, if I understand both of you, what we're going toward is, my thought would be that we don't allocate a dollar amount until we actually know what the costs are going to be, and then we look at those costs and hopefully from a shopping list perspective to say, okay, this is how we could allocate the monies that we have available, first from ARPA and then from others. I don't want to lose sight of something that we just bounced around. The ARPA committee did a lot of hours of work to come up with 15 out of the 56 projects. So right now, the scary thing is we could spend it all in one place, but our challenge is to do, I think, Jim, you hit the nail on the head. We need to take care of the buildings. We've had, for whatever reason, deferred maintenance. I'm really conscious of the reports somewhat being critical that we replaced historical windows with vinyl windows that have a shelf life shorter than a restored window, a good wooden window. So I think there's, besides fixing things, I would hope that the engineering groups that you use are very, and I'm sure they will be aware of the historical nature of the building, that we keep it as a cultural asset that we've all agreed to. Does that, would you be comfortable, Jim, kind of sort of saying, let's get the shopping list and then begin those?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it doesn't matter, the path that we take as long as we get to the same place.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So, I think let's get working on the buildings, let's get working on the culvert, the things we know that we can, put some money into. We could allocate a certain amount now, and if research says it's not enough, come back and discuss it, or allocate the dollars later.
Sure.
Doesn't matter.
I just want to clarify something. We threw around the Queechee Road, and we're not going to fix the Queechee Road for the amount of money that we have. We're talking about an engineering study to allow us to address fixes. I think we all can tell Queechee Road stories from past mud seasons when it was not paved and so on. But the fact that we just simply put a few stones and pavement over pretty wet areas continues to haunt us. So we're not talking about the true fix of the Queechee Road. We're talking about that engineering study when we talk about that.
I've got a question for Jay.
Please.
So can we use these engineering studies for David Hall and the rec center? Or you mentioned we had to go to an architect? Can't we just say, here's the study, and this is what they said needs to be fixed, and then go out to bid for those projects?
I don't feel 100% comfortable with that. There's a thought process that, let's just stick with rec center for a minute. There's a thought process that maybe we can reuse that shaft, the elevator shaft. It's possible that, we need to, re-gig it, put it somewhere else. I think that, we could pull this in and say, if it was just drainage, I could pull a contractor in and say, okay, let's look at some French drains and, it needs to go under the road. But I think it's a little bit more than that. We got some roof work, up by the cupola. He talks about a little bit about, you know, the spacing between the old building and the new building. The elevator shaft, you know, I think I would like to know just a little bit better how this all fits together. And the second thing here is, you know, we have preschool there, you know, and I think it's, you know, time that we just ensure that if we're going through and we're doing all this work, that to the best of the historical possibility of those rooms, we bring it up to code. Those bathrooms itself are not ADA accessible. Only one of the rec center bathrooms are ADA accessible. You know, you don't need an architect, but the ceilings are pretty, you know, pretty weathered and the lighting is, you know, so, you know, somewhere you need to stop there and just say, okay, I'm just gonna go with the drainage, but I think I would like to somehow extract or to understand how this is gonna kind of come together and have someone say, you know, let's just say it ends up being a $250,000 project. You know, you're doing a $250,000 project. I don't want the next town manager to say, God, they redid that freaking rec center and the 2 rooms are just not compliant. You know, where today we've got a situation where it was like, you know, don't mean to not pointing any fingers, but you know, you had something that was installed and now we're dealing with this 22 years later. To the best that our money will go in rectifying these buildings, I'd like to say, you know, yeah, for this amount of money, we'll be up to code and you need to address this. If you don't address it, then you spend a whole lot of money on, you know, you still can't use the building or something like that.
So when you go out to bid for an architect, what will be the description of what you're looking for?
Building envelope.
I can't answer that yet, Mary. I don't even know if it, you know, it's possible. It's, you know, a historical engineer like, you know, Chris Cole was, whether it's an architect, you know, that's part of it, you know, that's something that, you know, I haven't really, you know, it's been like, okay, this is in policy level. I'll let them hash it out. I've thought about how this is gonna move forward. As far as how an actual RFP is gonna go together, I haven't thought that through.
And the data you have is 5 years old, and there could be new problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just, the one thing that sort of continues to just bother me with this is that, you know, someone just mentioned the envelope. Well, there's 2 sides to the envelope. We have this water penetration, and we have rotting, and we have bricks that are deteriorating outside. But the Energy Committee has been, you know, kind of trying their best to sort of say, let's do something about the energy usage in the building. And I think that's what we're all aware of is, and I tried to say it before, is we could concentrate on one building and have a really great rec center and exhaust our money. But I think our target needs to be twofold. One, tactical and what we fix so that the issues today get solved. And second, bring an awareness to all of ourselves in the community that we need to address these over the long term. So there may be more projects coming down the line. So in the interest of moving on,
just to,
yes,
do we need a motion?
That's my first question.
You know, go and tackle the building estimates and go and tackle the culvert. I mean, what do we need to move on?
I feel a little bit more comfortable saying, you know, these 4 things. And
so we clearly identified 2.
Yep. So the 2 buildings, sandwiched in there somewhere was the Jennyville culvert. And then I just also threw in there the engineering study for Queechee Road.
Right, which was not part of the ARPA analysis. Right? Or did
it wasn't on the top 15, I don't think, or
no, it wasn't.
But it's been hanging around. And another reason I throw that out there is, again, if the infrastructure money, my understanding is going to flow through the state. And if we want to put ourselves in a position to deal with Queechee Road,
that would be good money to get.
having something, having something shelf ready is kind of the way they talk.
So you may not know this, is there a rough estimate of what the
So,
engineering study
if
would
the state says, hey, we've got, money to rebuild bases of roads and repave, we could say, great, and then they're gonna say, what's the scope, what do you need? And we're gonna say, we need to take that step. So, again, I think the other three are ARPA priorities, but I think that we can fit in this study.
What's the rough cost, do you think, for the engineering study?
I don't, it was just before my time on the board that we had a firm look at the Quechee Road from Gilson to Webster, roughly. Does anyone remember, Mary?
Was that when, Mike Willis?
I think so.
Yeah, I don't remember how much it was.
Okay.
So he didn't give an estimate, but he outlined the problems. There's wedge on kind of the uphill side. Drainage is very poor. And I'll just say the riverside, or I'll call it the downhill side, because it seems to me the road kind of slants. But the what's it called? The
Guardrail?
Guardrail, thank you. The guardrail side is kind of a steep slope, and that's kind of moving, downward towards the river. And then yet the drainage on the opposite side of the guardrail is a lot of wedge and very difficult for cross drainage and stuff like that. So
So we
if you're
don't
good,
have an estimate.
if you're going to address the root problem, it needs to be looked at a little bit more in depth.
But I mean, just based on other engineering studies, you don't have a guess as to, all you're talking about doing is the
I would say a minimum 50 grand.
50 grand.
In this atmosphere, I might say upwards to 75.
That's fair.
So to go back to the question at hand is, are you comfortable just moving forward? Are we comfortable with just moving forward? Or do we want a general motion that we are moving to the operational side of the house to assess the cost of those projects and then come back to the board with the,
Like a little bit more of a green light. I think that Jennyville Road is, fairly solid. We can get some ballpark figures, but, there's an engineering component and an implementation component to that.
Right.
I think that was pretty straightforward. I think that the buildings are the real ones where it's gonna be like, okay, drainage and, all the basics that really need to be done is 400 grand. And, some of this other stuff is an additional 300 grand, however that goes. But I think that's the one that's kind of a wild card.
Yeah, maybe it's a couple of motions. Let me take a stab at the first one.
okay.
Right. So I make a motion that we authorize the town manager to do the necessary studies on rec center and Damon Hall to determine the priority projects and the costs.
I'll second that.
Well, he's not gonna do the studies.
Well, to make the studies happen, right? To
Let me-
contract for the studies.
Let me clarify that. So the town would move forward with a scoping study
Yeah.
on the rec center and Damon Hall.
All right, that's fair.
Okay.
So I make a motion that we authorize the town manager to move forward with scoping studies on the rec center and Damon Hall.
I'll second it.
Second, Andy, okay. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Hearing none. Motion passes.
And I'd like to make a second motion to authorize the town manager to move forward with the culvert replacement on Jennyville Road.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Is that right? Okay.
Any discussion?
Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I think I should be listed as abstain, as it may look like I have a personal interest in that.
And any remaining fill, we want moved to John Lane. But, and I'd like to make a third motion.
Wow.
So Dave, correct me if I'm wrong here. I'd like to make a third motion that we authorize the town manager to do the engineering study Well, to get a quote for an engineering study for Queechee Road.
So by doing that, I would put it out to bid.
Yeah.
And basically, if it became, if for some reason it was $150,000 and it was just outside of the scope of the other projects, then we would back out of it. Just know that that would be the step that I would probably take to get that.
Yeah, so, but
Price,
then
yeah.
you'd come back and you'd say, here's the.
Say, look, here's the
what's
quotes we
before
got,
bid.
65 grand is in our wheelhouse, you know, oops, you know, much more than.
I didn't hear the motion.
Yeah, okay.
No, I'm sorry.
So the motion, so I'd like to make a motion that we authorize the town manager to put a bid out for an engineering study on Queechee Road.
So just a bit. Okay, I would second that.
Do we need to clarify what we mean by the Queechee Road? Really the entirety of the Queechee Road? I feel if we're gonna do it, we need to do
Do
it,
it specifically.
you know.
The whole road?
It's
Well, I have my favorite speed bumps and
There's
all.
I think we can I think what'll probably happen is we'll pick up Mike Willis's work, and then if more boring work needs to be done, or if, you know, an evaluation is done and it says, okay, you know, it's really just these 3 segments that are really problematic. Obviously, that may be the outcome, that they say, you know, look, the entire road doesn't need to be reconstructed, so to speak, but these 3 segments need to be reconstructed, and that, but at the end of the day, hopefully the entire thing gets repaved. Yeah?
I'm comfortable with that. I maybe talking about.
No.
Okay, I think we have a motion on.
Yeah, do we have a second?
I second
You
it,
second.
yeah.
Okay. Any additional discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay, hearing none. So Mary's pouting a little bit.
No, I said yay, yes.
So that's it. I think we've allocated enough projects to start, and we'll see how things come back before we.
Very, very much so, and, you know, we'll cross our fingers that we can maybe go deeper in the list. Okay, were there some comments on the ARPA piece? Okay.
Did you have a comment?
You know, in the very early stages of the ARPA thing, one of the things that got a little bit reworded in the process when it went into the offices was that funding was to be used for things that couldn't be otherwise funded, and that sort of got reworded to things that wouldn't normally be taxpayer funded, and those are sort of different things. So, you know, leveraging money is one thing, but funding things that there are already overage funds for, already contingency budgets for, and things like that. It would be sad to me that our whole ARPA fund became a road slush budget. I really don't think that's how it was intended. I'm excited about the building maintenance and that we could get a contractor, architect person to help us understand how to preserve these architecturally. I think that's great.
So Rebecca, just a point of information, 2 out of the 3 that we just discussed are the top priorities.
I did understand that. I think sort of now we're talking about one that wasn't in the top, and yet again, we're in another road thing.
Yeah.
So, I'm just.
No, that's fair. I mean, that's sure.
You know, it's the wording I just want to throw out that was originally ARPA funds hypothetically should be used on things that cannot otherwise be funded, and that got reworded to not tax funded, and those are different things, so.
Thank you. Greg,
It
did
was
you want
supposed to be for something for town, for special, not just a slush fund, I thought.
Yeah. Greg, I was wondering if I could put you on the spot and you had any comments as chair of the committee.
Sure. Do you like me to take a
Sure.
there?
Yeah.
Am I up? I just want to say that the rec center is a mess. And I'm really surprised that you're trying to remediate all the problems there. Working out of it, I can see that it really needs to be replaced, unfortunately. I don't know if you've been talking about it being a historic building. It's just a mess, and I don't understand why it's historic. Okay, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Who's that?
Helen Esmond.
Oh.
Greg?
Oh, just to address the question about the use of the ARPA funds, we had a process of filtering all the projects, and the first screen, right, well, the first screen did involve whether or not other funds were available. Part of the balancing of the issues did involve understanding that this was a one-time opportunity really to use these funds, but there are definite needs of the town that exigent circumstances can take over. You know, this is a recommendation, but all throughout the process, it was well known that what our recommendations were just that, and the ultimate authority for use of the funds rests with the select board, regardless of what we wanted to have happen with it. The charter that was developed really said that. So
In your charter, is there any point that goes back to townspeople for any portion of the money?
no, the charter was the definition of the authorization that the board gave to us. So all that we got was the authorization to make recommendations after studying everything.
And in anywhere in your list of recommendations, 1 through 15 or 1 through 77, was there anything about creating a town fund that projects could apply to?
No.
Like a grant funding?
No.
With a lump portion of it?
No.
Okay. Thank you. You're welcome.
Wait, I have a question.
Oh, sure.
So what do you think about what our motion that we just voted on?
As far as directing Dave to take studies out, I think it's prudent. I think it's necessary to have a basis for searching out other funds, if other funds are available, and to use ARPA funds for that purpose. To leverage them in that way is really a wise use of the funds. It's something we discussed as well in the ARPA committee.
But we just worked on those top 4 or 3 of your top priorities.
Yes, can you ask the question again?
So the question is, are you satisfied that we took your suggestions and we're acting on it?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, my satisfaction really isn't an issue, but yes, I think.
Yes, it is.
Well, you want to feel your process is respected.
You spend you and the other members of the committee spend a lot of time, and so I want to respect that. I think we did. I hope so.
We appreciate that. I know that the members of the committee are following along as well, and I was happy to see that the things are moving along already. It's pretty fantastic, so
Okay,
time well spent.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Can I
Greg.
make a quick
Okay.
comment, just that they are gonna potentially bury the power lines right in the same area as the culvert, so in terms of timing on that, we might be wise to time according to, with that.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
They're burying the power lines on Jenny Hill.
okay.
in
They
that
will come
area.
out of the ground on one side of the brook, go overhead and back into the ground. I
Oh, they're
got
not
this
buried
from,
in that field?
I got this from a guy who did the layout of the line
Oh,
for CVPN, or
Okay.
Green Mountain Power, that they can't go under brooks and stuff. They've got to go overhead where there's a bridge.
Plus they asked, they said it looks pretty rough, are you gonna do anything with it? So, yeah, Dan,
So it's going to be a case of an up and down power line.
all right, no, the person on the road the day I talked to had a totally different answer than that, that's why I'm just saying, hey, did we know the status of that? No need to dig it up twice.
Okay, let's go on to new business. The Dog Warrant, 2022 Dog Warrant.
so
Mary's not on the list.
Brian
End of
and
the time you
James are here. It's pretty self-explanatory.
So is this an annual,
This is an annual thing. It's an annual,
By statute.
so I shouldn't worry about it?
now,
Not
even
if your
though
dog's license, you should be worried.
this is, we tend not to go to the extreme. I believe James calls and tries to needle them, but there are certain powers given to the constable on this day. But it, you know, gives a list of those people that aren't licensed with their dogs, and we.
James has authorized them to go and shoot the dogs, right?
If they don't license them?
You've got to read the text. That's not the first move, it's actually, he delegates a select board member.
Oh, okay.
Those powers exist. But yes, this is statutory and happens every year. I think we're a little bit late because I left it off on the last agenda, but, you know, we're.
So the motion is to what? Adopt the,
2022 dog warrant.
okay, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
To adopt the dog warrant for 2022. And
There's a number of
you
dates.
seconded it? Did you second it?
Yes, I did.
Clark did.
Okay. Any discussion? Yes. Could we possibly change the language next time around? Hereof, fail not, and do return make of this warrant, with your doings therein.
That's in statute. That is in statute.
Is that the statute?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We're not
You talk to your representative.
I'm just gonna have to call Greg for interpretation. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any additional discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any objections? We have another year.
Just process wise though, like letters will go out.
I'm not sure if letters go out or whether James just calls.
It's up to James,
Yeah.
to give it to him.
But residents do get noticed.
Maybe a knock on the door, but they get notice. They had notice when you sent postcards prior to the rabies clinic, right?
I did not send postcards.
You didn't send postcards? But anyways,
We can ask James what he does.
yeah.
There's 124 on the list, which just seems like a lot.
James, you call.
Yeah,
You
I'll
call.
I call when I show up. I'll just add that that's also the list of dogs that were licensed last year, but not this year. So the number of dogs that are not licensed in town
Yeah, I'll take it back.
probably is triple what that list is. That list is only based on what dogs were licensed last year, but not licensed this
So
year.
you're saying if I get another dog, I should not license it?
Oh, you
So
should.
I can stay off the list?
Yes.
Within 6 months, after 6 months, it has to be licensed. But didn't this come off from your current dog list?
Correct, but the
Yeah.
way that that report is generated is
Oh, yeah, it's
based
the
off
one
of
that was done last year.
if somebody was
Yeah.
licensed, if a dog was licensed last year,
Okay,
but
who's
was
gonna
not
do the
licensed this year thus far,
So
that dog would be unlicensed,
Quick
but
spiel.
Great.
if someone hasn't formally licensed their dog, then they're not in the system and they're not gonna show up
Well,
in
that
a licensed
is
dog
up
report.
another Vermont statute that the select board shall create or conduct a dog census on a yearly basis.
Right.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
So I'll pull up your hand.
That'll put me way over budget. by the way.
Yeah.
No.
I want to hear everybody complaining about the budget.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone for the
ARPA
dog
funds.
warrant. Let's go on to item 2, the Hartland Junk Ordinance, which Dave is going to sail us through.
Yeah, this is actually pretty quick, and I believe I gave you the ordinance
Yes.
in your packets. Kind of give you that just to kind of want a refresher that we got it and what it says. However,
Sorry, they're already in effect.
It's been in effect since 2008, I believe.
That's what the date is on.
Yeah.
The enforcement officer, even though it's got all three names, myself, James, and Sean on the agenda, my primary concern was to have Sean recognized or appointed by the select board as an individual that can enforce this ordinance. I believe a few years back, I had a lawyer, he felt pretty confident that I didn't need to be officially appointed as town manager. And I believe that probably carries over for James as well. But I figured, since we were going to appoint Sean, that just to have it in the minutes that, you know, the town manager is officially recognized and the constable as an enforcement person, I thought was wise. And then I thought I would just add that every year we reappoint, you know, fence sitters and other things. I figured I would just add this to the list so that someone doesn't come in and say, well, what year was Sean appointed as enforcement officer? And it was like, you know, well, geez, that was back in 2022 or whatever. We do it every year, it's fresh and it's right there, and nobody has to go too far.
Well, it says right here, enforcement officer means any municipal official, police officer, constable, health officer, etc., appointed by the select board.
Sure, but then in 3D, it says for purposes of the enforcement in the judicial bureau, the town administrator, if one exists, the town manager, constable, sheriff. It's not, it does not mention the ordinance administrator. So I think we have to go, someone has to go through the document and clarify the response.
Essentially, I won't get too far into it, but Sean needs to be appointed and recognized, and it's just wise to just kind of confirm, you know, that the town manager and the constable are also enforcement.
So we're not
capable.
changing this at all? We're not changing the
You are
ordinance?
simply appointing Sean as an appointment and enforcement officer, and oh, by the way, we are also appointing Dave and James, just to make sure it's on the record.
Okay, does someone want to make a motion that would include the 3?
I would move that the town manager, the town constable, and the ordinance administrator, Sean,
McGranigan.
be appointed as enforcement
Junk.
officers for the junk ordinance.
Okay, do I have is there a second? Mary?
Actually, I'll just make a comment, Clyde, you threw in Sean's name at the end there, but I like the fact that it's just the position.
Okay.
Town manager,
Pull that,
constable,
yeah.
ordinance administrator, so that, you know, it's just the position, whoever holds that position is
I will,
afforded that luxury.
let's see, if I say pull it, and the seconder has to agree.
I do.
Okay, great. Any additional discussion?
Well, so I'm just gonna go back to this. Then, Dave, stretch your patience a little longer. So don't we have to change the ordinance then to include ordinance administrator?
It does say zoning administrator in there. It's loose terminology, but.
What number are you looking at?
Article 3,
3D.
the very last item in Article 3.
Yeah, 3D is the one I picked up on.
So it says for purposes of enforcement, in the judicial bureau, the town zoning administrator, if one exists, the town manager, constable, any sheriff, police officer, or other enforcement officer shall be the designated enforcement officers.
And I'm on Article 1, number 3,
Okay.
so definitions.
Municipal official, yeah.
Which, it's interesting, that does not say the zoning.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, the document is,
Could be.
seems to be a.
Pretty
having
big,
columns
yeah, but
together, you know.
I would say that if you have designated and appointed someone, that list doesn't need to be exhaustive. That, you know, you've appointed someone under Article 3. It fits pretty close with the zoning administrator, but I think that someone can look at this and say, okay, you know, it's a list meant to incorporate
But number 3 catches all, it says any municipal office.
Yeah, that's
So that would
what that
cover-
says too,
That
under,
would cover everything.
So I would,
okay, okay,
I think that it's clear enough, that it would carry through.
Yeah, so we have a motion on the floor and I get a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
As you said.
Sean, good luck.
Three
It's a tough issue in town and, yeah.
Yeah. I think we have more junkyards than any other town in the state of Vermont, and I'm not kidding. We have a lot.
You ain't been on the back towards the tops.
Well,
Yeah.
we are.
Okay, let's move on to the manager's notes.
So we're through Old Home Day. Phil pointed out the good work that the rec folks did, both John and Mason and the committee. Excellent day, just all came together very nice. Beyond that, we're still focused on the after-school program. John has been working with the school and a couple other people that I think down the road potentially we could maybe subcontract with, or perhaps the supervisory union would subcontract with, which is where ultimately this may go. But in the meantime, you know, I think what we're coming back to is a workable solution is the rec center trying to, you know, keep what we've got, you know, and try and hire the staff needed at least for another year. So the supervisory union perhaps could put something in long term. And in so doing, we're looking at basically a person that would be hired specifically to kind of run the after-school program, you know, rather than John trying to
Where
look
do
at
they
it.
host it? Is it in the basement of the rec center or?
A combination is, it's hosted both in the basement and outside. You know, we come inside on, you know, rainy days, we try and keep them outside as much as possible. During the winter, they come in, you know, inside as well. But it runs, you know, I go over there and there's 5, 6, 7 kids inside. You know, they might be doing arts and crafts. And outside, there may be another 10, 12, you know, whether they're running around playing tag or shooting hoops or, you know, throwing the tennis ball somewhere, so. Having someone kind of, would still be, you know, focused around the hours of the after-school program, so it wouldn't be like a 40-hour position, but it would be basically someone delegated to kind of oversee, you know, kind of a head after-school person to kind of pick up some of these issues or focus on them more than what John is capable of doing.
Is that a replacement position? Did somebody leave? Or?
No, this is just, you know, offering a couple hours, bucks more an hour, and giving them a bit more responsibility. You know, and we get a lot of people phone in and, you know, we need to kind of fill gaps or call somebody else in and, you know, we're trying to hire people or whatever it is. So it's not a new position, but it's, you know, offering somebody $2-3 more an hour to, you know, focus on some of these things so that, you know, John's not getting dragged into it. We did the same thing with the summer camp this year. You know, it's something I've been talking to John off and on for a couple of years, but I think that his committee kind of put it in his head as well, and he kind of grasped onto it. So I think that, you know, I think it's a good step for John, and I think that it's helpful. You know, I think that we've got 1 or 2 good names that can help us out there. But the next step is the 3 people that are gonna do this, you know, that we need. You know, having the one person is good, but having the other 3 people to fill those spots 5 days a week and count on coming in is gonna be the challenge. But that's what we're gonna shoot for, and you know, at the moment, things look pretty promising, but you know, they look promising up until about March, and we have to pull the plug on the program. Windsor's having difficulty with this, Weathersfield's having difficulty with this. You know, it's just a tough nut to crack, but you know, John's spending some time on this, and hopefully that comes into place. Also, I mentioned Mason Thompson was hired to replace Jenna, who moved on. And Mason played soccer at Castleton. He's been out a couple of years, and he's worked with John in a couple different ways. He is from Hartland. And we were able to pick him up, and he worked for us yesterday, and he's on board and moving forward.
Great. It's exciting to maybe get the staff back to normal. That's good. I would hope that, if possible, if this concept of moving that after-school program up to the supervisory level, that the department would have a representative in that discussion. Just a thought. I know we have Christine, but that would be.
The other, going into highway, just a couple things, and maybe Stacy can just add anything that I missed, but the grievance period is drawn to a close. They hope to lodge the grand list on Thursday. 14 days from Thursday would be when they would need to notify us that they would want to appeal to the V.S.A. So you guys are all part of the V.S.A, so just know that timeline, and it's in the works. If I didn't get that timeline right, let me know, but I think that puts us about the 22nd for...
Oh, I'm gonna be on vacation.
Well, that's just when they need to notify us.
Oh, I'll be on
So
vacation later.
We will make sure we let you know when it's going to be. We'll say, hey, look.
I'm changing mine right now.
So,
Yeah, if we lodge on Thursday, it'll be 2 weeks, that Friday, the 22nd. They'd have to let the town clerk's office know that they were appealing.
And then how long for the grievance?
And then the timeline beyond that, I have to defer
Yeah,
to Brian.
and then it falls into Brian's court.
Yeah, and I don't think he heard.
Say that again?
Well, Manny was just asking when might the V.S.A see some action, and I guess we don't really know until things happen.
If someone appealed, yeah, if,
Yeah.
Yep,
yeah.
I will keep you abreast.
I think you have 14 days to call a meeting after the deadline.
Yes.
So yeah, if it went down on the 22nd, then.
But don't worry, we'll, either way, we'll get together for election, reasons leading up to the primary.
Okay.
August primary.
So the good news is there was only 14
Only
14 that grieved, so that's much lower than the last 2 years, so there is a good chance that you might be able to squeeze through this fairly painlessly.
That was out of 180 notices sent out.
Well, it all depends on whether they're happy with your decision.
So how many were there last year?
We sent 185 notices out, and we had about 20, somewhere between 24 and 30, like 28.
So it's about
grievances.
50%.
So usually you hit about 15% roughly of the number of notices you send out, and this year we're below that.
Great.
So the other thing with the highway, this isn't immediate, but we've started working on it. It's kind of a prelude to the Class 4 and legal trail policies that gets into this a little bit more in-depthly. But as Rebecca said, Green Mountain Power is looking to bury the utilities almost the entire length from essentially Brownsville Road out to basically Samuel's residence there. Essentially is, past Densmore Hill Road. So it's fairly big. We haven't finished that discussion yet. But we also have a cable guy at First Light that wants to bury on Clay Hill Road. We've had a couple of residents request to bury utilities across the road. All this is kind of problematic for us, depending on how deep it is and, whether it's going perpendicular or kind of parallel to the road. There's a little bit to this. We've been, in the past, a little bit lackadaisical. V.S.A came in, I don't know, about 8, 9, 10 years ago, buried their cables, and it's been a thorn in our side ever since. It's in and around our culverts, our inlets and outlets and stuff like that. So we did come up with a standard. Phil and Mary Usai, a couple of years ago, 2020, we had somebody up in Garcia Lane, put some utilities, they undergrounded them, and we basically used the state standard. Needs to be 5 feet under the road, and rigid conduit, rigid steel conduit or steel sleeve.
I'm sorry, that's a state standard or a state statute?
A state standard that we essentially carried over. Regardless, the larger issue here is just kind of formalizing this. Yeah, it's okay to go bury your cables, or yeah, it's okay to go bury Green Mountain Power. Sure, you know, catches me on a bad day, and I'm like, yeah, go do whatever you want. You know, just formalizing it and saying, you know, kind of putting in writing what the project is going to be, kind of put a little bit of a site plan together, materials to be used, and then we essentially accept that or reject it or accept it on conditions. What is in statute is that someone essentially needs to come to the town. If you were to work within the town right away, needs permission from the town. Town and the state, essentially the same statute, they call it an 1111 permit, but it's essentially asking permission from the town to do work in the right of way. We're just looking to put kind of a formal little application to it. Once in a couple of weeks, when we get to Class 4 and legal trail policies, we're going to ask a little bit more of anyone that wants to work in that right of way, because it generally means that a fair amount of work needs to be done to it. But kind of...
You're not saying no, you're just putting
rules
in place.
We could potentially say no, yes. Yeah.
But I mean, if there's a reason to say
you know, we would say, look, you know, if someone wants to do a Class 4 road, you know, you need to upgrade that, and, you know, maybe not. You know, do we want an individual doing that work, you know, depending on what the work needs to be done? Does it need to be, you know, subcontracted out? And then you're talking insurance, you know, you don't want just any, you know, buddy back there with a backhoe, and next thing you know, they're like, yeah, I was doing, you know, work for the town, I'm in the right of way, and oh, by the way, my excavator fell over, and, you know, now I can't walk. So certain things in place, but yes, you know, you essentially dictate what can and can't be done within the town right of way. You want it to your standards, and you're going to tell these people, look, if you want to do this work, it needs to hit this standard. If you can't, then no, we don't want you doing the work. So works a lot like the state, and you know, again, for some of the, you know, we get some phone calls. It's just like, look, I need to, you know, it's right outside of my home, you know, and can I just pull this, you know, stuff out of the ditch line, and, you know, take me half hour? Yeah, no, not a problem. Green Mountain Power coming and saying, look, we want to put, you know, a live line underneath your road, and oh, by the way, we got to put another cable here, and you know, how deep do you want it, and, you know, far off the shoulder, and you know, things like that. Then it becomes, well, yeah, we don't want it 18 inches under the surface, we want it 3 to 4. You know, we want to know how it's going to be done, how it's going to be left, you know, stuff like that. So essentially formalizing what can be an informal process.
And then does that get mapped, all this project?
We have been told that we will get drawings of this, the Green Mountain Power job. But like V.S.A and, you know, First Light that's over on Clay Hill, no, we don't get maps.
But what I'm saying, so if somebody comes to you with, wants a 1111 permit and it's granted,
Yep.
is that noted somewhere?
Generally, it has not been. That's kind of what DigSafe is for.
I was going to ask you that they would have to pick up the expense of DigSafe.
No, we still have to dig, it's on us, you know, but even if it's dig saved, you know, having something, particularly a utility cable, 5 feet under the surface or 4 feet under the surface compared to a foot and a half, or, you know, another question is how, you know, okay, we have a culvert there, what's the depth, you know, how far beneath the culvert are you gonna go? You know, what are you gonna do if you hit a ledge and, you know, stuff like that? It's gonna be dig safe, but it's still, if we don't specify, even if it's dig safe, it can be difficult to work in the right of way if you don't try and tell them we don't want you there. You know, the big thing that we're running into the utilities is the ditch lines. You know, everybody wants to be, you know, yeah, you know, back in, you know, 2005, we could go 2 feet under the road. Well, we now ditch at least 3, you know, upwards to 3 feet, you know, in the ditch line, at a minimal of 3 feet really. So we've got to get at a depth lower than the ditch line, which puts them, we want them at least a foot under the ditch line, at least, so that when we go to re-ditch it, DigSafe will tell us there, but it's still difficult if they're only 4 inches below the surface, you know. It's just a way of protecting their turf there.
So, if I can summarize, I think I'm very familiar with the issue, and we have agreed to a standard, and now you're going to actually potentially have an application that would kick in should someone approach the office and say, can I do this?
So 2 different issues. Anybody who is working within the town right of way should get permission from the town.
Okay.
At some point in the near future, we'd like to say, sure, you know, please fill this out so we know what the heck you're doing, and then we can file it and say, yes, we agree. And then it's in writing and everybody understands that's what's gonna be done. The second thing is as far as the bearing of the utilities, we have come up with a standard that says if it's perpendicular to the road, you know, that'd be 5 feet under the ground, and that it be in a steel rigid conduit or a plastic conduit that's wrapped in a steel sleeve, 1 or 2. So that's something that we've had in the past.
Okay, great. Anything else, Dave?
He's got a whole miscellaneous section here.
There's a page 2.
So that grounding is coming up. Our ditching project for the year will also be on Jennyville Road. It is a ditching project and will include some berm removal. I dare put that word out there. So that is coming down the pike. We have been in communication with the property owner, and it's not anything. It's a long stretch, but it's not anything bad.
Do you have any correspondence that brings your attention?
I do. This one came in today, and usually I like it to go in the packet so that you all see it, and it's kind of, but this one pertained to tonight's public comment section. Unfortunately, I printed it off while you were in the public comment section, but nevertheless, this came in today, and I told Sandra I would give it to you folks, and it pertains to the town plan update.
I don't think we need an action on this at all. I just have a follow-up on our start of the executive session. I received correspondence from Sherry Clark about parking on Station Road. Little did I realize that I was stepping into what Davis said is a 12-year quagmire. James, thank you for your efforts over time. Please continue to do your best. I wish the church would hire some 18-year-olds to park cars on church days and not, or church suppers. But I'll write to Sherry. Dave CC'd me on. She started pushing him. I received some messages late last night with pictures that I was not able to open, so I'll get back to her and just say that we'll continue to ask for her cooperation, but there's not a lot that we can do at this point on that situation.
I think there's also correspondence from Andrea Ambrose.
No, this is from Sherry Clark.
I'm saying there's also
and I got back to, I didn't bother CC News, I didn't want to break any rules. I got back to Andrea and explained that for the time being, Damon Hall is still closed for a number of reasons that I don't want to go into a discussion of, we all are aware of, that the tent outside the rec center is available for any programs, which is being utilized by some programs now, and that the town manager will revisit this in early fall with the idea that we can get back to normal operation, and just stay tuned.
And I would point out just for the folks here that the library meeting rooms are now open. So it just seems a little out of sync.
Yeah, we talked about that before, and I would just really like to defer the operational side to Dave and leave it at that.
And also, it's not like they've always been in sync. The library was closed for months.
Right.
And Damon Hall was open and operating and doing the town's business and supporting the residents, so.
Thank you, Mary, because that's it.
I agree, it's just that we were leading, now we're in second place.
You know, and I had one catch up beginning of June, you know, so.
Yeah, it's still.
Figure.
So,
okay, any other business? I think I'm going to ask Mary for a motion to adjourn.
She doesn't have
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye, it's 7:56.
And if anybody wants a donut before you leave, I'll go back to donuts.
Oh, my God.